Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of History with Sai, where we're continuing our study of ancient Elam and the Elamites. In part 1, we got to know a bit more about who the Elamites were, as well as explore some of their earliest contacts with Mesopotamia. In this program, we're going to take it a step further, as we explore conflicts between the world's first empires and various Elamite kingdoms. So, let's begin. Around the year 2300 BCE, one of the greatest figures in history was creating and consolidating an empire that up until then was the largest the world had ever seen. After his death in 2279 BCE, he would live on in the memories of the people as the ideal ruler, and one with a sort of godlike status. I'm talking, of course, about Sargon the Great, who founded what we call the Akkadian Empire. There are inscriptions from his time telling about his exploits in Elam, but for more concrete information, we have to go to his descendants. Texts indicate that between the years 2278 to 2270, Sargon's son and successor, Rimush, conducted a major campaign against a coalition of Elam, the kingdom of Marhashi, and another state called Zahara. He actually goes into quite some detail, telling how his forces killed 16,212 Elamite troops and took another 4,216 captive, including an Elamite king named Imasini. Elam seems to have remained under Akkadian control for several more decades, including during the reign of Rimush's successor, Manishtushu. However, dating to the reign of Sargon's grandson, the great Naram-Sin, we have an object of real significance. It's an old Elamite inscription found in Susa at a temple dedicated to the Elamite god, Inshushinak. It's not exactly a treaty, as some scholars say, but more like a document outlining vassalage between a certain Elamite king and Naram-Sin. Since we know the approximate date of Naram-Sin's reign, this would place the treaty to somewhere around 2250 BCE. Though not actually named, the Elamite king is believed to have been Hita of Awan, a name that also appears in an old Babylonian king list of Awan and Shimashki. Shimashki is a place that we'll talk about very soon. Anyway, the document seems to impose upon Hita the obligations of a typical vassal, tribute, and compulsory military service. While it doesn't say much about Elamite civilization, it does illustrate an important interaction between Elam and ancient Mesopotamia. In terms of Elamite territory, Naram-Sin claims to have ruled over most of that as well, from Susa all the way to the kingdom of Marhashi. Of course, these claims are hard to believe, let alone verify. Just the span of the territory was humongous. Now you might be wondering, how could the Akkadians possibly control such a vast territory? Well, one way was through dynastic marriages. There are records of one of Naram-Sin's sons marrying a princess from distant Marhashi. If this indeed did happen, then it's very possible that other marriages between members of the Akkadian dynasty and Elamite royals could have also taken place. As the Akkadian Empire began to decline, the various cities and kingdoms of Elam became independent. What's interesting is that many of the rulers of these Elamite cities appeared to have been initially Akkadian governors, as can be determined by many of their names. It was also during this time that one of the most extraordinary Elamite rulers came onto the scene. His name was Puzur-Inshushinak. A native of Elam, he began as the ruler of Susa. We don't have exact dates, but it was probably around 2100 BCE when Puzur-Inshushinak launched a military campaign in the Zagros Mountains. It's said that he captured something like 80 cities and towns, including lands called Kimash and Hurti. He also ventured into northern Mesopotamia and took over some cities there. In the end, if his inscriptions are to be believed, he took over pretty much what is today most of western Iran and northeastern Iraq. Some would say that he established Iran's first known empire. Unfortunately for him, this empire was very short-lived. Though the city-states of Sumer and Akkad were fragmented, they allied together to face their common Elamite enemy. We know that the city-states of Uruk and Lagash were part of this coalition. Utuhegal, the king of Uruk, had recently kicked out his Gutian overlords. He seems to have teamed up with Lagash's king, Gudea, in fighting against Puzur-Inshushinak's westward expansion. Their alliance seemed to work because we have records indicating that at least Gudea was able to venture deep into Elam and conquer several cities there. After Utuhegal's death, his son-in-law, the famous Ur-Nammu, founded his own dynasty, which would go on to create a Near Eastern empire to rival that of his Akkadian predecessors. While forging his Neo-Sumerian empire, he went to war with Puzur-Inshushinak and Elam. As with many events from this time period, the details are scarce, but we know that Ur-Nammu took Susa and put an end to Puzur-Inshushinak's reign. His son and successor, Shulgi, held on to Susa and the Elamite cities of southwestern Iran. Like Naram-Sin before him, Shulgi was able to do this through strategic alliances, marriages, and partnerships with other kingdoms, including Anshan and Marhashi. Marhashi seems to have remained firm with Shulgi and his successors until the end, but Anshan at times was a bit shaky. In the 34th or 35th year of Shulgi's reign, Anshan rebelled against Neo-Sumerian authority. After personally intervening, Shulgi transferred authority of Anshan to another vassal of his, Iabrat of Shimashki. To help ensure that Iabrat would remain loyal, Shulgi may have even wed one of his daughters to him. With the pacification of Anshan and the allegiance of Marhashi, Shulgi had secured the eastern part of his empire. These alliances and the general policy of the Neo-Sumerian Empire towards Elam remained pretty much intact during the reign of Shulgi's successor, Naram-Sin. However, Naram-Sin's successor, Shu-Sin, didn't fare as well, and the Neo-Sumerian Empire began to fall apart under him. Around the year 2031 or 2030 BCE, several organized rebellions simultaneously broke out in Elam. They were led by a prince or minor king from an area called Zabshali. In response, Shu-Sin launched a large-scale military campaign against the Zabshali coalition. In this particular case, the alliance that Shulgi made with Ibarat, who was still around at the time, paid off. Now we don't know for sure, but either Ibarat, who still controlled Anshan, actively supported Shu-Sin in crushing the rebellion, or he simply remained on the sidelines. Either of these would have been crucial in maintaining Neo-Sumerian control of Elam. Perhaps though, Ibarat was a pragmatist. He had been able to keep his position in Anshan due to support from Ur, but maybe he didn't know how bad things were getting for the Neo-Sumerian Empire. Scores of Amorite tribes were pouring in through the empire's western border, putting great pressure on Ur's authority over the area. This had been an issue since the time of Shulgi, but now the problem had become extremely severe. By the reign of Ibbi-Sin, the last Neo-Sumerian king, the Amorites had overrun much of Mesopotamia. In fact, all that Ibbi-Sin really controlled were some of the core Sumerian cities of the south. This is when Ibarat made his move. He had lived through the reigns of 3 Neo-Sumerian kings, with Ibbi-Sin being the 4th. As far as Ibarat was concerned, he had paid his dues to Ur by keeping Anshan and the surrounding areas in check. With Ibbi-Sin's authority rapidly eroding, Ibarat invaded the Elamite lowlands and occupied Susa, putting an end to Neo-Sumerian control of the area once and for all. Shortly after annexing Susa, Ibarat died, and his son, Kindatu, took over. Kindatu was lucky. He had inherited a new, almost completely unified Elamite state with its 2 main cities, Anshan and Susa, under his control. Did he stop there? Of course not. Why would he? Ibbi-Sin's empire was collapsing like a house of cards, and with pretty much all of Elam under his control, Kindatu had the resources to take out whatever was left of Ibbi-Sin's empire. However, it didn't seem that Kindatu was in any rush, as nearly 20 years passed on, with Ibbi-Sin still sitting on the throne of Ur. In reality though, his Neo-Sumerian empire was pretty much non-existent. Near the end of his reign, all that Ibbi-Sin really ruled over was the city of Ur and perhaps a few nearby towns. As for the rest of his empire, it had essentially been broken up into little fiefdoms that were now controlled by his former governors or Amorite warlords. Finally, in 2004 BCE, Kindatu made his move and sacked Ur. He captured Ibbi-Sin and took him back to Susa as a trophy. Whether he was later killed or simply made a prisoner isn't known. What we do know is that the Neo-Sumerian Empire was no more, Kindatu ruled over a unified Elam, and, for the most part, Mesopotamia was fragmented into little petty kingdoms and warring states. So here would be a good place to mention a few things about the Shimashki line of kings. According to the Susa king list, there were 12 of them, with Kindatu being the 6th. The dynasty's founder is believed to have been named Kirname. For the most part, they were minor rulers of the area called Shimashki until Shulgi promoted Yibarat as the overlord of Anshan. After Kindatu's capture of Susa and the extermination of the Neo-Sumerian Empire, the Shimashki kings adopted the title King of Shimashki and Elam. From then onward, Elam would be mostly united, not necessarily as a single political entity, but more as a federation of smaller kingdoms and princely states. Around 1900 BCE, the Shimashki dynasty eventually gives way to one called Sukkalmah. The word Sukkalmah, which means something like regent, actually seems to be of Sumerian origin and was the title given by Neo-Sumerian kings to their representatives in various provinces. This applied to their conquered Elamite territories as well. Now, as a dynasty, the Sukkalmahs can be a bit confusing because they didn't operate like your traditional dynasty, and it's for this reason that many simply call this era of Elamite history the Sukkalmah period. The Sukkalmah dynasty was actually started by the 9th Shimashki king, Ibarat II. This is what makes the Sukkalmah dynasty unique. According to Elamite scholar George Cameron, power was actually held by a triumvirate of individuals. There was one senior ruler who was the Sukkalmah, or Grand Regent. Then, there was a co-regent of slightly lesser stature who was usually one of the Sukkalmah's brothers or an extremely close male relative. He was called the Sukkal of Elam and Shimashki. Both of these individuals were believed to have resided in Anshan. Finally, there was the junior co-regent, the Sukkal of Susa, who could either be the Sukkalmah's son or even his sister's son. As the name suggests, he resided in Susa. The reason for the establishment of the Sukkalmah system may have been due to the attacks of the powerful king of Larsa, Gungunum, who for many years consistently attacked and captured Elamite cities, including Susa. When the Sukkalmah died, the throne passed on to the Sukkal of Elam and Shimashki, the next in line after this being the Sukkal of Susa. It's important to remember, though, that while they may have been unchallenged in their respective cities of residence, they overall presided over a confederacy of Elamite kingdoms and states. Still, the Sukkalmahs and the Sukkals were extremely influential in both Elamite politics as well as those of Mesopotamia. At times, they would ally with certain states of Babylonia against others, as was the case during Hammurabi's time when they formed an alliance with Babylon and Mari against Eshnunna. At other times, the Sukkalmahs and Sukkals would arbitrate disputes between various Babylonian kingdoms. With regard to Sukkalmahs, Elamite specialist Luca Peyronel writes, and I quote, "It has been rightly pointed out that in this period the prestige of the Elamite sovereign was apparently greater than that of the Amorite kings. The Sukkalmah seems to have had the role of arbitrator in Mesopotamia and was called father by the Mesopotamian kings, who referred to one another as brother. The motive for this presumed superiority may have been the tradition connected with the destruction of Ur, which grew markedly during the Old Babylonian period, together with the perception of Elam as a kingdom covering a huge area, without rivals, in Mesopotamia, and only vaguely defined, in which rich resources of precious materials and metals were present." So that quote, in a sense, outlines both the respect, reverence, and also fear that many of the kings of Mesopotamia had for the Sukkalmahs of Elam. The Sukkalmah dynasty, or if you'd like, system of Sukkalmah and Sukkals, lasted for over 400 years, which is an incredible length of time, especially in the ancient world. And, as far as we know, it seems to have worked out pretty well because the confederacy that was known as Elam during that time held pretty much intact. Despite this, the reasons for the dissolution of the Sukkalmah dynasty or system are a bit of a mystery. As of now, we don't really have any records as to why or how the Sukkalmah dynasty dissolved, only that several new dynasties followed it. These new lines of kings brought about what we call the Middle Elamite Period. That era will be the subject of the next program in this series on the history of Elam. Thanks so much for joining me. If you liked the video and learned something, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also check out the website for sources and additional materials. Thanks so much, and have an awesome day.